Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Rose, and today we're going to be talking about the keto diet and mental health. So, just a quick disclaimer before I get into anything that I've learned. I am not a medical professional. This is just an opinion of somebody who is doing this diet and seeing the results and wanting to know why. I'm not giving you medical advice. I am just here to entertain and happily share what I have learned along the way. That being said, the reason that I went down this very alarming rabbit hole is because one of the reasons that I've kind of gone keto/carnivore, a big part of it was the physical, right? I want to lose the weight. I want to feel better. Things like, my restless leg syndrome and my chronic inflammation and my fatigue and my cerebral palsy, like my degenerative disc disease. There's a lot of physical reasons why I embarked on this journey. But on the other side of that coin, I have also hoped that I would see some psychological impact. So, for reference, I suffer from major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress syndrome, migraines. I have had a stroke before I was born, so I do have a traumatic brain injury, and that impacts what it impacts. It's kind of all over the place, but I do suffer from executive processing dysfunction. So I kind of wanted to understand why over the last 40 some odd days of doing this keto/carnivore challenge that I've been doing, why my mental health is getting so much better when the antidepressant I'm on a pretty high dose, and it's meh. Why migraine medication just doesn't work for me, and why I haven't had more than one migraine in the last month and a half, when I used to get them pretty much every other week. So going into this, I knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of information, like solidly, just because there really is no human trials. There's a lot of information on what they're testing in rats, but they haven't really been able to do a whole lot of testing in humans aside from epileptics, and there's a couple of studies done on bipolar and schizophrenics. So it's all just kind of a causality, I think is the word I'm looking for. It's all just kind of hypothesized, linked, can be linked, suggestive, all of that. So take it with a grain of salt and do your own research. So the things that we know at this point can be impacted by a ketogenic diet. On the neurological side, we have epilepsy, which is one of the original reasons why the ketogenic diet was used for. I think it was actually the reason it was used for, like 100 plus years ago. We have multiple sclerosis, we have migraines, we have Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's disease, and traumatic brain injury. Now, I do believe that when they cite traumatic brain injury here, they're talking about recent strokes or brain trauma. However, I am going to kind of lump myself into that just because I do have a traumatic brain injury. I have had a stroke. Regardless of time frame, the damage is still in there, so I'm going to see how that applies. The neuropsychiatric crossover would be your autism and your Alzheimer's. Now, I have not deep delved into any of these things quite yet. I will be looking specifically into autism and the ketogenic diet specifically because my adorable little 3-year-old goblin is autistic. So that's going to be kind of fun to learn about and see if getting her more ketogenic would help some of her day-to-day struggles. But obviously, my kid will eat what she eats. She eats a very standard diet right now, and her pediatrician is very happy with what's going on. So, diatribe aside, the psychiatric side of what keto has been suggested to impact are things like schizophrenia, bipolar, major depressive disorder, eating disorders, substance use disorders. I find the last one particularly interesting just because I struggle with food, textures, stuff like that. I also firmly believe that I am addicted to carbs. Just because when I eat them, I want to binge. And that could be linked to like the PTSD and the depression and the anxiety. However, it's all kind of interconnected in this gigantic soup in my head, and it's not... It's a problem. Like the food noise, I think probably always be there. So we're just going to try to reduce it as much as possible. So ketogenic diet has been shown to address neurotransmitter imbalances, inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance, which is a lot of things that I had zero understanding of when I started this kind of little research project. I didn't really understand what it all meant. I have run across a lot of technical jargon that I don't understand, and full disclosure, I have used AI sometimes to really give me a good definition or examples to further enhance my understanding. So if any of this is incorrect, please let me know so I can have a good picture understanding of what I am in fact trying to do. So insulin resistance is literally the brain blocking insulin but letting glucose in. So the body can't deal with glucose without insulin involved. But what happens is you get a little bit of inflammation and your brain blocks the insulin from entering the bloodstream where all of this glucose is kind of hanging out, and it's not able to shove that glucose into the cell to be dealt with. So this whole thing can cause a condition called cerebroglucose hypometabolism. Big words, I hope I said it right. Which basically just means a sluggish brain. So it's all that brain fog, that brain fatigue, all of that just nasty stuff you get when you've eaten too much carbs or sweets. You just want to go take a nap. It's been linked to Alzheimer's. This particular condition of cerebral glucose hypometabolism, said it better that time, is linked to conditions like Alzheimer's, depression, PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders. So there's strong evidence that ketones and ketosis improves the mitochondria in your cells, which is going to improve insulin resistance. Just because you're impacting your neurotransmitters, your inflammation, your oxidative stress, everything else that I'm about to kind of go into, it all kind of feeds into this very vicious cycle. And in theory, again, they can't prove it because there's been very little human involvement in these kind of trials. And when it is involved, it's not like a clinical trial. It's just a questionnaire and people filling it out. So the neurotransmitter imbalance. So I'm going to read this because it's a mouthful. So keto shows potential to impact glutamate and GABA, which I'm not even gonna attempt. No, I am gonna attempt to say it. So glutamate is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It's responsible for learning and memory. So when you have this particular thing directly impacts conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia, because if you're not able to retain and then learn, your brain is going to start degenerating, which is literally what those disorders and diseases do. There's a reason why it's called type 3 diabetes. And GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid, hope I said that right, is a major inhibitory neuron. So it calms the activity and reduces anxiety and thought rumination. So this is literally something that I deal with. I deal with the whole, stories in your head just going over and over and over and ruminating and getting more upset and more anxious, and it feeds into the depression, which feeds the anxiety, which feeds the PTSD, which feeds into the insomnia and the RLS. Like it's all interconnected in the brain. So why does this matter? So when you eat a high carb diet, the theory is that you are blocking these neurotransmitters and you're causing that imbalance. So you're seeing an increase in symptoms. So what they think ketones do, and again, I cannot say for certain, I'm just telling you what I'm learning, is that they enhance the conversion of glutamate into GABA. So there's a whole bunch of neurological stuff that I don't necessarily understand. But basically, you want glutamate to transition into GABA, so you go from an excited brain into a calm, relaxed brain. So that's going to increase, your feelings of safety. It's going to decrease anxiety. It's going to help with depression and with all of these other kind of symptoms that go along with PTSD, because your brain is not in a fight or flight mode. You're also at that point able to intake more memories, more learning, and have it eventually transform into long-term memory, so you can kind of go back to functioning like you're supposed to. Like I said, it's the neurotransmitter piece is a huge blind spot for me. It was a lot of technical jargon, a lot of things that I don't understand. But that is what I've been able to understand from what I've been learning. So just by changing your diet, you can help increase your mood, even if that's the only thing that it does. So inflammation and ketosis. So I was super interested in this piece. I knew that I did something because of all of the information that I've collected before I decided to do this challenge. But I found a study from 2017 from the University of California, San Francisco. Now, their study is in mice, so already we're looking at a non-human trial, which is expected. Like, that's kind of obvious at this point. But they discovered a molecular key that could lead to new theories for reducing brain inflammation, specifically with the ketogenic diet. So they were concentrating mostly on stroke and brain trauma for this study. So keep that in mind. But obviously the things that they were learning can then go back to the neurotransmitter debate and then, into the oxidative stress, and then it all kind of just links together. So they identified a protein that links diet to inflammatory genes. So this goes back to my discoveries on what ketogenesis is, what ketones do, in that they help certain genes kind of shut down and other genes kind of ramp up in a more positive trajectory than when your body is feeding on glucose. To my understanding, right? I'm just a layperson. I don't understand the entire ins and outs of any of this. So in rats, because this study was done on rats, keto and calorie restriction are known to reduce inflammation, improve outcomes after injury. They're talking about brain injury here, and extend the lifespan. But they are unable to narrow it down to say for sure exactly why it's doing that on a molecular level. So until we can really understand that, there's not going to be as much use coming out of a study like this. So I can theorize that if they could figure out on a molecular level why this is happening in rats, they will probably go to clinical trials within humans, specifically in the pharmaceutical realm. I think it's going to be very similar to the GLP-1s going around right now that literally put your body into ketosis, which is one of the reasons why they work. So what they did notice is that there's a small molecule called 2DG. Could not tell you exactly what it does. Above my pay grade. But they got... Correction. When they introduced 2DG into half of the mice, who, the non-control group mice, they were able to get the levels of information extremely close to the control group, which just shows that the ketones are doing something. But keep in mind, they also did a calorie restriction on the ketogenic mice. So something about that combination of things is decreasing the inflammation. So the ketogenic diet in these mice reduced glucose metabolism by lowering the energy metabolism via an activated protein called CTBP that lowered actively inflammatory genes. So again, kind of above my head, but this molecular level that they found has something to do with a protein in our bodies that is changing how the genes express, which, as I understand it from my delve into ketosis, is a very good benefit to have. So it kind of confirmed what I already suspected of a ketogenic style of eating, which is that my inflammation is getting better. I can feel that 40 some odd days in. So whether or not I understand entirely what the science says, I can feel it. My study of N of 1 is showing results. So oxidative stress. It took me a long time to figure out what oxidative stress is, mostly because all of the explanations are highly technical. My brain could not wrap itself around the explanations. So I went to AI and said, hey, explain this to me. So in that regard, I hope it's correct. So there's been a few studies that hypothesize ketones decrease post-brain injury stress and improve the mitochondria in the cells. Now, the interesting thing about this little tidbit of information is I keep seeing over the last couple of weeks that mitochondria and ketones are linked, like so linked, which tells me that you literally can heal your body with food, which is something that I always kind of just scoffed at and blah, blah, blah. I am sorry for thinking nasty thoughts about anybody who said that previously. So AI described it to me, because I was having a really hard time understanding what it is, as your body is a car. Every car has an engine. Food and oxygen are your fuel. So oxidatives are the byproduct of your body using that fuel. So they're if I understand it correctly, they are extra oxygen molecules kind of floating around in your system, which is highly inflammatory and will damage all the mitochondria, all the cells around it, because it's trying to rebond, because it's a partial bond. It's very unstable. So what your body does is it sends antioxidants to help bind to these incomplete molecules, to neutralize them so they stop damaging your body. Which is like, now I understand why everyone's going on about antioxidants being so good for you. I feel like I need to do a little bit more research still into oxidants versus antioxidants, just to really hammer home my knowledge of it. But the study alluded to us being able to make some antioxidants, as well as getting them from our diet. So I need to learn more about that before I really form an opinion. But so how do these four things kind of relate? How do they interconnect? So inflammation is in the brain specifically. So we're all just talking about mental health, right? So inflammation disrupts inflammation disrupts brain function and communication. So this is going to impact your neurotransmitters. It's going to impact your balance of gut bacteria that can cause inflammation. So I'm not quite sure what the link is, but there is a brain-gut link that they're starting to find out, how diet impacts your gut, which sends signals to your brain. I'm assuming it has to do with those neurotransmitter shenanigans. So this is going to cause oxidative stress. And oxidative stress can cause inflammation. Inflammation then causes more oxidative stress. And this can be caused by, chronic stress, chronic fatigue, unhealthy diet, etc. There's so many things that can push yourself into an oxidative stress situation, which makes sense to me, because there's that old adage that says, stress will kill you. So it makes sense. And all of this together impairs insulin signaling pathways, which then feeds into your insulin resistance, which then feeds into your inflammation, which triggers your neurotransmitters, which then causes oxidative stress. So inflammation molecules with the insulin receptor signaling hindering uptake. So the inflammation is going to disrupt your insulin receptors, your insulin signaling for when you eat a whole bunch of glucose, and then it's going to disrupt the uptake of the insulin it's going to inhibit the uptake of glucose in your cells, causing insulin resistance. So when you're insulin resistant, you are hyper glycemic, which can in turn start the cycle over again at oxidative stress. And as I've learned all of this, it makes complete sense why my brain is so muddled. So I'm still digesting all of the things I'm learning, but, you know, the neurotransmitters play in depression with, I mean, that's the whole reason why antidepressants work, right? So they are, they force your neurotransmitters to work in various different ways. But if there's an imbalance, well, that explains why some antidepressants don't work for some people, or why only specific ones do, or why you have to be on such of a high dose. So I'm going to keep going on this diet. I'm planning on hitting 6 months. And we'll just see how I feel. Right now, even just 40 some odd days in, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, my body's feeling a little bit better. I am chronically ill, so it's never going to be 100%. But instead of 50 some odd percent on any given day, I'm sitting at more of like a 60 to a 70%. So a marked difference. And my mental health, I am starting to notice some changes. So I'm a little happier. I am able to really set my anxiety aside a little bit and joke around with my family. I'm getting less depressed, which is a new feeling for me. I've lived with depression for so long that I don't know what it's like to live without it. So this is going to be really fun to kind of discover a new side of me. A side that, the depression might not always, it might not go away. And that's okay. But if I can get it to a point where I don't need medication and I can manage it with the way I eat and exercise, that would be amazing. And it makes me really sad that I am, heading towards mid-30s and just learning about this. I wish somebody would have shown me the full impacts of what you eat matters when it comes to mental illness. I think about all of the years of therapy that I probably would have done anyways, just because I'm a better person for it. But I think giving everything else that goes on in my head, not having the imbalance for everything else would be so helpful. But again, I am going to give this diet a while before I go changing any of my medications, just to make sure. I will talk to my doctor. And whether or not she agrees is a video for another day. But I am going to make sure that she at least knows what I'm doing, regardless of if she likes it or not. So she knows if something goes sideways, what it might be, or if it gets loads better, she also has that information. I'm going to continue to do research on this just because I don't think I'm ever going to be done. I also think that because this is still kind of an emerging thing within the psychiatric world, that it's going to be a few more years before I'm really comfortable with what they're finding. So I'm going to continue using me as patient zero and collect all of the data along the way, and then I will come monologue at you again. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. If you wouldn't mind hitting that like button and that subscribe button, that would really mean a lot to me and help me out. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.